Part 57. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 599. ID Con 1714835. Usopp pulled down the goggles on his hat and put them on, observing Bellamy carefully. His windshield also has a telescope-like effect, allowing you to see more clearly. This Bellamy is really powerful, Usopp said with emotion. However, during the observation, Usopp discovered something about Bellamy's movement. Bellamy's ankle seemed to have turned into a spring, and it also gave off shockingly high-frequency vibrations. Those vibrations made Bellamy's feet also be driven to step on the ground at high frequency. Bellamy's ankle is really abnormal. Could this be the secret of his ability to move quickly? Usopp said cautiously. Usopp observed the strange behavior of Bellamy's ankles when he moved, and believed that this was the real reason why Bellamy could move so fast. Looking at Rog, Luffy and Sauron's hard work, Usopp also decided to do something. Usopp took out the sharpshooter longbow, and also took out 2 bows and arrows and 2 projectiles. After quickly placing the 2 projectiles on the tops of the 2 bows and arrows, Usopp opened the sharpshooter longbow and placed a bow and arrow on the bowstring. Okay, let me give you a critical blow. Usopp aimed his bow at Bellamy's right ankle. Usopp shot this bow and arrow. The arrow flew towards Bellamy's right ankle. Although Bellamy often uses spring resonance, in many cases it is temporarily stopped. Usopp took this opportunity to shoot the bow and arrow. Bellamy was just about to use the spring resonance again when his right ankle was suddenly shot by a bow and arrow. Of course, his ankles have become springs, and he is not afraid of bows and arrows. But the bow exploded quickly. What? Bellamy said in shock. Bellamy's right ankle was hit by a bow and arrow, and after the tip of the bow exploded, his right ankle was stuck with a group of highly concentrated viscous liquid. Taking advantage of this time, Usopp quickly put the second bow and arrow on the bowstring. Usopp aimed the arrow at Bellamy's left ankle. One more. Usopp fired a second arrow. The second arrow hit Bellamy's left ankle. The tip of the bow and arrow also exploded. Bellamy's left ankle was also stuck with a high concentration of viscous fluid. The ankles of Bellamy's feet were all stuck to this highly concentrated viscous liquid. Damn it, my ankle. Bellamy found it difficult to resonate with the springs in both of his ankles. Even if it is used forcibly, the frequency will be greatly reduced, and it will not reach the high frequency of spring resonance that tramples on the ground dozens of times in a second. At this time, Rog took the opportunity to discover the opportunity. Okay, wooden pile air cannon. Rog aimed at Bellamy's body with the staked air cannon on his right arm and fired. Boom! Bellamy was hit by the powerful high-pressure airflow from the stake air cannon. This time he was caught off guard because he was concerned about the ankle and did not use armament hacking. Bellamy rolled out after being hit. Rubber dot rifle. Luffy first twisted his right arm like a twist dot, then he hit Bellamy hard. Bellamy was hit in the back. 3 sword style. 1 is strong force. 2 is strong force. 2 is strong force. The muscles of Zoro's arms suddenly became extremely strong. He gripped the samurai sword tightly with both arms, and slashed towards Bellamy with the samurai sword in his mouth as an aid. Bellamy suddenly felt a huge threat, and after being attacked by Roger and Luffy in succession, he hurriedly used arm domineering all over his body. Quickly, the black metallic luster-like force field covered Bellamy's whole body. After Bellamy's whole body was covered with this amazing defensive power, Zoro swung a katana with both arms and slashed over. Chiang chiang. Bellamy's chest and neck were slashed, but fortunately, his powerful armored haki perfectly protected him. But Bellamy also felt the huge consumption of his arm domineering. After all, resisting the opponent's attack with arm domineering also requires a lot of physical strength. Sauron's body flew past Bellamy. Bellamy stopped quickly, and he used his hands to remove the high concentration viscous liquid on both feet and ankles. After the highly concentrated viscous liquid was removed, Bellamy was able to move his ankles flexibly again. Damn it, someone shot a bow and arrow. It seems like someone is plotting against me, Bellamy said angrily. He looked at Roger and Luffy again, wanting to end the battle quickly. Roger, Luffy, and Zoro fought hard together against Bellamy. Usopp is supporting from afar. Mont Blanc Kulik and the apes and orangutans also watched the battle. Boss, should we hurry to help? The orangutan said. This, I'm afraid it won't work, Mont Blanc Kulik said with a serious face. Why? The orangutan asked quickly. Mont Blanc Kulik looked at Rog and Luffy who were fighting, and he said earnestly, now they are fighting fiercely with Bellamy. If we go up and fail, it will be a disservice. Mont Blanc Kulik knows when to play and when not to. Now Rog and Luffy and Sauron are 3 against 1. In fact, the battle can be said to be barely maintained. If Mont Blanc Kulik and the others went up blindly, it might be a disservice to Roger and Luffy. Just as the port area fell into a fierce battle because of Bellamy's appearance, other people either fled or watched the fierce battle. After Bellamy suddenly attacked here, Robin, who was recuperating in the tent, quickly moved to the inland area near the port under the escort of Nami, the goddess of spring, Chopper, and Sanji. Chopper turned into a human form, lifted Robin's hospital bed with Sanji and fled towards the inland city. Nami and the goddess of spring are guarding from the sidelines. The port is under attack. Hurry up to the inner city. Chopper lifted himself up in front of Robin's hospital bed and strode forward. Chopper, slow down. Sister Robin is still injured after all, Sanji said as he lifted himself up from behind the hospital bed. Sanji cares about Robin very much. Robin is now lying on the hospital bed, holding the red carnation that Sanji gave her before. Sanji, you guys work so hard, I really. Robin said with some gratitude. Although Sanji lifted his arms up to the hospital bed, his feet kept moving all the time. But his face was filled with endless love. Sister Robin, don't worry. It is a knight's duty to protect ladies, Sanji said lovingly. For Sanji, now is the perfect time to be a hero. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee Er A Dream. Chapter 600. ID Con 171485. Nami, who was running next to her, looked back at the port from time to time. She said, what on earth is going on? I just heard them shouting that Bellamy was coming. Sanji said, Bellamy called, and he actually called. Since he called, he must be trying to seize the dominance of Demon Valley City. Otherwise, it would be impossible for that stingy Ge Longtai's revenge. Is this really the case? Then can Rog and Luffy defeat him? Nami said with some confusion. Let's see, wait until we move Sister Robin to a safe place. I will go to support her. After all, I heard from Mont Blanc Kulik that Bellamy is not a fuel-efficient lamp either, Sanji said. I'll go with you later at this time, the spring water goddess also said. Sanji looked at the goddess of spring water, and he said, Goddess, just leave this kind of thing to a knight like me. The spring water goddess shook her head and continued to say gently, I have such powerful magic, I must help everyone fight. It's not easy for Sanji to refuse, and he can't stop it at all. This holy goddess-like woman with long golden hair was something he couldn't stop at all. Goddess, if you really want to be like this, then I can't be happier to be able to fight with the goddess as a knight. Ha ha ha. Sanji's face was filled with happiness. Sanji and Chopper, as well as Nami and the goddess of springs, continued to escort Robin to a hotel deeper in the city. They hurriedly rented a room and sent Robin there. It's really hard for you to take care of me so much, Robin said kindly as she lay on the bed in the room. Miss Robin, rest as much as you want, Sanji said. He looked at Chopper and Nami again, and said, Sister Robin, I'll leave it to you. Don't worry, Nami said. Robin is definitely safe and sound here. Chopper was now in human form, patted his chest and said. Sanji looked at the spring goddess again and said, "Goddess, we are going to fight together." "Okay, Sanji. Let's go together," the goddess of spring water said softly. "Okay, let's go," Sanji said with a heart full of love. Sanji and the spring goddess hurried out of the room together. "Start heading to the port and join in that fierce battle." In the port area of Magic Valley City, the battle between Rog and Luffy and Zoro and Bellamy is still very fierce. Rog, Zoro, and Luffy joined forces and indeed posed a certain threat to Bellamy. Bellamy also needs to concentrate on fighting now. In addition, Usopp secretly shot a cold arrow, making Bellamy even more unpredictable. Bellamy's advantage from the very beginning was gradually falling into a war of attrition. Bellamy then significantly increased the combat speed in order to defeat the opponent as quickly as possible. Spring Resonance. Bellamy rushed to Roger quickly. He swung his arm and hit Roger in the chest again. Rog slammed the iron birch sword in front of his chest. Boom. This sudden blow hit the iron birch sword. Bellamy's whole body was covered in armed domineering energy at this time, and his punch was so powerful that the blade of the iron birch sword was cracked. But Bellamy didn't stop attacking. He raised his right leg suddenly. At this time, his right leg also turned into a giant spring under the condition of being covered by the armed domineering color. The right leg that became a giant spring was compressed to the extreme. Spring legs. Bellamy kicked his right leg sharply towards Rog's stomach. In addition to the compression of the spring, his leg itself also has the hardness of the armed domineering. Boom. Rog was kicked and flew out quickly. Bellamy's spring legs are similar to the spring cannon fists transformed into arms, and with the addition of armed domineering, the power is even more amazing. Rog was hit as if by a heavy artillery hit at close range. The hard walnut armor on Rog's abdomen also began to shatter, and Rog's whole body was trembling inside the armor. Under the huge impact force, Rog flew tens of meters away this time, and hit the ground heavily. Rog fell to the ground, smashing all the masonry on the ground. The walnut armor worn by Rog at this time was highly damaged on the abdomen and was basically broken into pieces. The chest was also severely damaged. Rog's internal organs were injured due to the violent concussion, and it was difficult to stand up again for a while. Ahem, Rog suddenly felt blood flooding his throat and nasal cavity after internal organs were injured. After Bellamy successfully wounded Rog, he looked at Rog and was extremely happy in his heart. "Okay, first one," Bellamy said excitedly. During the battle, Bellamy was so crazy that he really attacked his prey like a sideburn. He quickly attacked Luffy again with the spring resonance. Luffy saw Bellamy rushing towards him, and he also fought head-on. Rubber. Tempest. Luffy punched dozens of punches together quickly with both fists. These fists densely covered Bellamy. Bellamy is domineering with a black metallic luster, but she is not afraid of Luffy's stormy fist. He rushed in front of Luffy. Spring finger gun. Bellamy's left and right index fingers stick out, like two pistols. Bellamy's left and right index fingers turned into small springs. Of course, the index finger is also pressed to the extreme. When the two index fingers touched the two shoulders of Luffy. Puff puff. Bellamy's two index fingers, which had been squeezed to the extreme, suddenly popped out, adding the effect of armed domineering. This makes the two index fingers as penetrating as a firearm with superior performance. What? Luffy felt a sharp pain in his two shoulders for a while, and he fell backwards. Blood spurted from those two shoulders. The shoulders of a person are very important to the two arms. After Luffy's two shoulders were injured, it was difficult to fight. Ha ha ha, is it like being hit by two firearms at close range? Bellamy growled wildly at Luffy. Luffy felt pain in both shoulders, and the pain seemed to go through the bones and flesh. The pain affected both of his arms, and Luffy felt like he lost control of both of his arms. Asshole rubber. Spear. Luffy was still fighting to the death in such an injured situation. He lay on the ground but kicked Bellamy with both legs. Luffy stretched his legs and kicked Bellamy in the stomach with both feet. But now Bellamy's whole body is covered in armed-colored haki with a black metallic luster, and Luffy's attacks have not shaken his opponent at all. Bellamy's face became very ugly, and he said angrily, "It's really ungrateful. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 601. ID Con 17154661. His right arm turned into a giant spring, compressed to the extreme. The left arm grabs Luffy by the neck and lifts him up. Spring Cannon Fist. Bellamy slammed her right fist into Luffy's stomach. Boom. With a loud noise, Bellamy knocked Luffy's body into the air. An astonishing amount of blood spewed out of his mouth, splashing into the air. Luffy flew out tens of meters this time, and smashed heavily to the ground far away. Boom. Luffy hit the ground heavily, blood was still flowing out of his mouth, and blood was also gushing out from his shoulders. Bellamy looked at Luffy, and he said happily, "Okay, the second one has been solved." Bellamy turned his head towards Zoro. Sauron is now trying to keep a distance from Bellamy. Now Bellamy's whole body is covered with armed domineering, which is extremely difficult to deal with. In addition, Bellamy can also predict Sauron's attack by virtue of his knowledge and arrogance, which leads to an almost one-sided advantage in the battle. Bellamy looked at Sauron, and the ankles of both feet quickly resonated dozens of times in a second. Spring resonance. Bellamy's body moved extremely fast. Bellamy suddenly appeared in front of Zoro. Spring finger gun. This time Bellamy attacked Sauron with both index fingers. Chiang Chiang. Sauron is a powerful swordsman after all, and his speed is much faster than Rog and Luffy. Bellamy's two index fingers popped out and were blocked by the blades of the two samurai swords in Zoro's hand. Are you responding quickly? How about this? This time, Bellamy turned all 10 fingers of his hands into springs, compressed them and attacked Sauron. Three swordsman style. Sword wolf style. Zoro's body swayed like a willow leaf in the wind, and the three katana swords in his hands and mouth coordinated to block. Sauron successfully withstood Bellamy's attack. Bellamy was also shocked. Sauron was able to perfectly find a way to resist according to his attack. Sauron took the opportunity to quickly distance himself. Three sword style. Tornado. Zoro used the three samurai swords together to create a powerful tornado of sword energy. In addition to its lethality, the tornado itself also has the effect of blowing surrounding objects away. Sauron himself can control the sword chi, so he doesn't have to worry about being killed by the sword chi. Bellamy was different, he felt himself being attacked intensively. Although under the protection of armed color domineering, he can't suffer any harm. Bellamy looked at the sword-like tornado around him. This thing kind of disturbs the line of sight, and it blows up things like gravel around it. Bellamy felt that her vision around her was disturbed. Sauron's approaching machine further opened the distance, and even used the tornado to fly itself high for a while before falling to a farther place. At this moment Sauron landed behind a pier. Behind is the vast sea. Behind is the sea. Zoro glanced behind him. The sea behind is an area where devil fruit users cannot enter. Thinking of this, Sauron suddenly had an idea. If you can't defeat the enemy head-on, then it's okay to use the environment and things that restrain the opponent to defeat him. Zoro looked at Bellamy, who was about to attack again. Okay, let's attack here. Sauron said to Bellamy. Bellamy clenched her fists, looked at Sauron and said, "Swordsman, you are about to be smashed to pieces." You can't dodge this blow. Bellamy's legs became giant springs together. The two giant springs began to be compressed to the extreme quickly, and Bellamy's entire body was slightly tilted forward. Zorro always paid attention to Bellamy's posture and determined the specific direction of his attack. If Bellamy's attack is going to be swift, think of it as a thrust from a giant swordsman. Sauron was able to determine which direction Bellamy was attacking. After Bellamy pressed his giant spring legs to the extreme, he jumped towards Sauron's direction. The two giant springs that were compressed were also released, and Bellamy jumped towards Zorro at an astonishing speed. Bellamy literally flew towards Sauron like a shot rocket. So fast. Sauron was shocked. Bellamy flew towards Sauron at great speed. His fist was facing forward, and once he touched Sauron, he would be able to smash Sauron into pieces with his speed and strength. Just as he was about to hit Sauron, suddenly Sauron's body suddenly fell down. What? Bellamy was extremely shocked, but his body had already passed over the lying Sauron due to inertia. Bellamy's body continued to fly, flying into the sea behind Zorro. This is the disadvantage of the Bellamy spring rocket, which is completely unable to change direction or stop during flight. In the end, Bellamy's body continued to fly for hundreds of meters and finally fell into the sea. Thump! Bellamy hit the sea like a heavy cannonball, causing a shocking splash of water. Sauron stood up again from the ground of the pier, and he looked towards the sea where Bellamy fell. Success! Sauron was very excited, he was very happy. Bellamy is such a tough opponent, but he has a fatal nemesis, and that is the sea. Devil fruit users will be deprived of their abilities by the sea, and they can't even swim in the sea like ordinary people, they can only sink to the bottom of the sea and drown. The crew of the Ape Mountain United Army and Usopp who watched the battle all saw this scene. Bellamy sank into the sea. Usopp said excitedly. Look, boss. Bellamy fell into the sea. The orangutan excitedly said to Mont Blanc Kulik. He couldn't stop himself and hit the sea. The orangutan said excitedly. If this is the case, he must be finished. After all, people with devil fruit abilities cannot move in the sea. Mont Blanc Kulik looked surprised, he still couldn't believe it was true. Many crew members of the Saruyama United Army also looked at Sauron who had successfully defeated Bellamy, and cheered like thunder. Long live the swordsman! Hundreds of people cheered Sauron. Sauron defeated Bellamy, although Bellamy was defeated by his own abilities. Sauron turned around and looked at the crowd, he was relieved. What an easy victory! Sauron said relaxedly. He retracted the three samurai swords into the scabbard one after another. Suddenly, in the sea water behind Sauron, a figure suddenly jumped out. At this moment, everyone's expressions were stunned. Whether it's Usopp, or Mont Blanc Kulik, or the apes and orangutans, or the many crew members of the Ape Mountain United Army. They looked at the figure jumping out of the sea in shock. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 602. ID Con 17155511. This figure was none other than Bellamy. Bellamy, who fell into the sea just now, unexpectedly jumped out again. Although Sauron had his back to the sea, he felt the murderous intent of a life behind him. Chong. Sauron abruptly pulled out the Yukaizu and Hideo Yazuan from the scabbard at his waist, crossed his knives and turned around quickly. And Bellamy, who jumped out of the sea, kicked Sauron. Clang. Bellamy was still armed and domineering with a black metallic sheen all over his body, and his right leg kicked Zorro's crossed swords. With great force, the Sauron bullet flew out. Zorro rolled more than 30 meters before stopping. Bellamy also fell heavily to the ground of the pier. How can it be? Usopp looked at Bellamy in shock and said. The others, Mont Blanc Kulik, the orangutans, and the crew of the Ape Mountain United Army all looked at Bellamy. They were all in disbelief. Bellamy is obviously a devil fruit capable user, but she also fell into the sea. But how can it jump out again? Zoro struggled to stand up again, clenched the samurai sword in his hand, panted heavily and looked at Bellamy. Could it be that your power blocks the action of sea water? Sauron asked Bellamy. Bellamy looked at Sauron, and he roared, my whole body is covered with armed arrogance, so that I not only have a defense harder than steel. In this state, my whole body is also immune to the influence of sea water. So even a devil fruit capable user can rely on the whole body's armed arrogance to avoid losing their ability. At this time, Bellamy suddenly disarmed her aggressiveness. He moved every part of his body, whether it was his arms or his legs or his neck. He stuck out his tongue and licked it around his mouth. Bellamy's armed color domineering is very strong, although it is relatively strong among the armed color domineering users, but it has been a long time for Bellamy to maintain the armed color domineering of the whole body for a long time. In the human battle, he defeated Rog and Luffy by virtue of his full body armed domineering, and he also endured the attrition war with Sauron just now. But covering the whole body with armed domineering is very exhausting. People who use the armed domineering color will have to spend 10 times more physical energy than usual if their whole body is covered with armed domineering color. Even though Bellamy was very strong, he couldn't use up his strength like this. What's more, he himself has amazing combat power by virtue of the partial spring of his body. So after continuing to use armament haki, Bellamy needed to relax. Okay, swordsman. Let's continue the fight, Bellamy said, looking at Sauron. Zoro clenched the katana in his hand and looked at Bellamy. As long as I hold them tightly in my hand, I will fight to the end, Sauron said in an imposing manner. Sauron pulled Onitsu out and held it in his mouth. The three samurai swords once again formed a fighting posture. Okay, even if you are at a disadvantage, you are so powerful and manly. Then I will give you a good pleasure. Bellamy clenched her fists. Bellamy slammed at Sauron again. He used spring resonance to quickly approach Zoro. This time Bellamy's arms also turned into giant springs. After his arms turned into giant springs, Bellamy compressed them to the extreme. Double spring cannon fist. After Bellamy approached Sauron, his arms bounced off together, and his fists hit Sauron at close range like two cannonballs. Ghost Slayer. Zoro's three samurai swords coordinated and unleashed a powerful slash. Chiang Chiang. The powerful attacks of the two were handed over head-on. Under this powerful attack power, Bellamy's double spring cannon fist successfully overwhelmed the ghost slash. Zoro's body was knocked away. Finally, he reached a position more than meters away and fell heavily to the ground. Well. Zoro struggled to stand up again. But Bellamy took the opportunity to get closer again. Spring legs. Bellamy jumped up, his right leg became a giant spring, and it was compressed to the extreme. Bellamy ended up on top of Sauron. Bellamy's right leg suddenly aimed to kick Zoro down. At this moment, two shurikens suddenly flew from a distance. After they hit Bellamy, they exploded quickly. Boom, rumble, rumble. Bellamy was deviated from the direction by the impact of the two explosions, and finally fell to the ground beside him. Sauron was rescued. Sauron, who was saved, looked at a figure that suddenly appeared on the pier. Bellamy also looked at the figure on the pier. I saw that it was the king of ninjas in a black ninja costume and carrying a ninja sword. The eyes of the king of ninja are like the eyes of a crow in the dark, full of insight into his opponent. As expected, Zoro looked at the king of ninjas and said. The king of ninja always comes to support at such critical moments. Who is this guy? Bellamy said in shock. He had never seen a ninja king dressed in such a style. Indeed, few people have seen the samurai of Wano country with their own eyes, let alone the ninjas walking in the dark. The ninja king looked at Bellamy and said, so you are that Bellamy. Bellamy looked at the ninja king and said, who are you? I've never seen anyone as weird as you. The ninja king looked at Bellamy and said, I am a ninja from Wano. You have never seen normal. The king of ninja had just been practicing martial arts on the coast farther away from the port area. Unexpectedly, Bellamy suddenly attacked here. He then came to support. Bellamy looked at the king of ninjas and said, "No matter what, if you dare to attack me, you are brave enough. Soon you will die without a burial place." The ninja king looked at Bellamy, and he said calmly, "I am willing to accompany you." Bellamy stared at the ninja king like a mad sideburn. But deep down in his heart, he was very curious as to why Mont Blanc Kulik and the Aruyama United Army suddenly appeared with so many powerful helpers. As a person who is good at fighting, Bellamy can feel that the ninja king is very powerful. Bellamy, who has been fighting fiercely with Rog, Luffy and Sauron, needs to continue to fight the king of ninjas. The ninja king looked at Bellamy, his whole body was ready for battle. Bellamy looked at the ninja king, and he wanted to completely wipe out the ninja king in front of him. But Bellamy still needs to pay attention to Sauron at this time. After all, there is still the enemy Sauron present. "Okay, come on," the ninja king said to Bellamy. "I'm going to beat you to pieces," Bellamy growled at the ninja king. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 603. ID Con 17160079. Bellamy clenched his fists, and his fists quickly turned into giant springs, and then compressed to the extreme. The ankles of Bellamy's feet also turned into springs. Spring resonance. Bellamy's whole body quickly started to move. The ninja king felt the opponent moving rapidly. And it was approaching him quickly. At last the king of ninjas felt that Bellamy was close at hand. Bellamy's figure appeared in front of the ninja king, and his arms that had been compressed to the extreme began to pop out, and his fists were fired out like cannonballs. Double spring cannon fist. Bellamy's fists hit the ninja king at close range like cannonballs. However, the figure of the ninja king moved aside gracefully like a ghost. Bellamy's spring cannon punch came up empty. What? Bellamy looked at the ninja king in shock. The ninja king moves around the area around Bellamy like a ghost. Hateful. Bellamy used the spring resonance to approach the ninja king again, but was successfully dodged by him. But the king of ninjas will not always passively accept attacks like this. The ninja king looked at Bellamy, and he quickly took out a kunai from the bag at his waist. Whoosh! The ninja king seized the moment and hurled kunai at Bellamy's throat. Bellamy's haki sensed the coming attack. He quickly ducked his head to the left. Puff! Kunai schemed over the right edge of Bellamy's neck. Although it missed the throat and veins, it also scratched the right edge of Bellamy's neck. Bellamy felt a spatter of blood and a pain in her neck. Asshole! Bellamy gritted her teeth and looked at the ninja king. After being hurt like this, he quickly used his arm domineering energy again. The force field of black metallic luster quickly covered Bellamy's whole body. After a long pause just now Bellamy can use the arm domineering all over her body again. After all, if the armed color domineering covers the whole body, it consumes 10 times more energy than usual, so use it with caution. "I'm going to kill you." Bellamy roared and charged towards the ninja king. The king of ninjas looked at Bellamy, who was rushing towards him like a crazy hyena. The opponent is in a very strong state now. The king of ninja looked at Bellamy. He could instinctively feel that it was not the right time to fight Bellamy head-on. The ninja king even felt that it should be delayed now. He moves around Bellamy with ghostly footwork. Bellamy attacked the ninja king violently, but whenever he wanted to get close to the ninja king avoided him like a ghost. It seemed that Bellamy was really fighting a ghost. And Bellamy is also aware that his whole body is covered with armed domineering energy, which consumes a lot of energy, and if this continues, his opponent will forcefully consume him to death. Okay, since it's like this. Bellamy suddenly stopped and stood there. His two strong arms turned into giant springs this time. Then the two arms start to come together. Bellamy clenched his fists like a gorilla, and at the same time the two arms that turned into giant springs were also compressed to the extreme. The Ninja King, Zoro, and Usopp all looked at Bellamy suspiciously. I don't know what Bellamy is going to do. Spring air explosion. Bellamy's arm snapped open, his fists slamming into each other. Boom. Suddenly there was an earth-shattering sound. It was as if two cannons shot at each other with shells at close range. The people around him, whether they were the king of ninjas, Zoro, or those further away, Usopp, Mont Blanc, Kuruk, the orangutan, and the crew of the Ape Mountain Alliance army all felt an astonishing blast of air. Open. Bellamy's fists struck together with extremely high strength, coupled with being covered with armed domineering, the power was astonishing. Actually, centered around the point where his fists hit each other, he sent out an astonishing wave of air to the surroundings. Bellamy's spring air burst ripped through the air, causing an explosion of air. The huge impact of the air explosion rippled all around. The king of ninjas bears the brunt, being thrown away by the force of the massive air blast. What? The Ninja King's body flew into the air. Sauron was also affected by the impact of the huge air explosion, and his whole body was thrown away. What a powerful impact! Zoro's body was thrown more than 50 meters. Finally, Zoro quickly waved the two katana swords in his hands. Eagle wave. Zoro slashed out two sword auras like flying eagles with his two samurai swords. Sauron used these two sword chi to land slowly. Everyone around was also affected, but Usopp and Mont Blanc Kulik were far away, so they were only knocked down, and few of them were knocked away. Wow! What a powerful impact! We can't stand it anymore. Hundreds of people, including Usopp and Mont Blanc Kulik, were knocked down. Bellamy's spring air explosion has amazing power. Bellamy, who successfully performed this blow, looked around. It's really powerful. This blow is beyond my imagination. Bellamy looked at the people around and said excitedly. Bellamy himself was shocked by the powerful force of the spring air explosion just now. Because the attack just now was performed by him by concentrating his greatest strength and covering his arm with armed arrogance, so the power was astonishingly great. How's that ninja doing? Bellamy stuck out his tongue, licked around his mouth, and looked around for the shadow of the Ninja King. At this time, on the wooden pillar below the pier where the two were fighting, the Ninja King was clinging to it. The impact almost threw him overboard, but he managed to grab the wooden posts below the pier just in time. Clinging to the wooden post, the Ninja King waited for the right moment. Bellamy's strength is really strong, and when using the armed color domineering, it can't effectively damage at all. However, as an elite disciple of the Wano Country Ninja Organization, the King of Ninja also has some understanding of armed haki. Especially when the whole body is covered with armed haki, the consumption of physical strength is simply astonishing. This also means that Bellamy's consumption like this will consume a lot of his body. Once Bellamy relieves the state of being covered with armed domineering in order to save energy, then it is the best time to make a move. Bellamy, who was standing on the pier, looked around and saw that there was no shadow of the Ninja King. He also felt a little tired. After all, it takes a lot of energy to cover the whole body with armed domineering colors. It seems that he has gone to sea. Bellamy disarmed the domineering color of the whole body. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 604. ID Con 1716119. The King of Ninjas in the Dark also discovered this. The figure of the King of Ninjas moved quickly like a ghost, secretly climbed onto the pier, and then began to approach Bellamy's back very covertly. The Ninja King waved two hands, all of which are special weapons that have been replaced by ninjas, hand armor hooks. The two gauntlet hooks shone coldly like two metal claws. The Ninja King quickly approached Bellamy, and finally got 2 meters behind Bellamy. But at this time Bellamy felt the danger coming from behind, but he didn't act violently. The gauntlet hooks on both hands of the King of Ninjas grabbed the back of Bellamy's neck. Chiang chiang. But at this critical juncture, both gauntlet hooks hit Bellamy's neck, but it was as if they were hitting extremely hard metal. It's actually like this. The King of Ninjas saw that Bellamy's neck was already covered with a black metallic luster, armed with a domineering color. Bellamy turned quickly after the Ninja King's failed attack. Humph, I knew you would be like this. Bellamy clenched his fist, ready to attack the Ninja King. At this moment, suddenly a bow and arrow shot from far away. The bow struck Bellamy's body. The top of the bow began to explode violently. Wow, what is this? After the top of the bow and arrow exploded, there was actually a rotten egg inside. Rotten eggs were all over Bellamy's head. Bellamy had never seen an attack like this. In the distance, Usopp is holding a sharpshooter longbow and looking at Bellamy, who was hit. It finally worked, Usopp said happily. Just now, Usopp shot a sure kill rotten egg star with his bow and arrow. The King of Ninjas quickly attacked Bellamy's left shoulder while Bellamy was disturbed by the rotten egg star. At this time, Bellamy's body was not completely covered by the armed domineering, but the vital parts were protected. Puff. The Ninja King's gauntlet hook successfully scratched Bellamy's left shoulder. Bellamy's blood spilled out. Bellamy gritted her teeth and looked at the wound on the left shoulder, which was immediately bloody. Bellamy quickly covered her whole body with the domineering black metallic armor. The Ninja King wanted to continue the attack, but saw that Bellamy's whole body was covered in armed haki, so he had to give up. Damn guy! After Bellamy was wounded, he angrily attacked the Ninja King. His fist quickly hit the Ninja King. But the Ninja King evaded him with his ghostly footwork, keeping him at a distance. At this time, the King of Ninjas continued to play procrastination tactics. He wanted to drag Bellamy to death by avoiding the edge and procrastinating. Bellamy was completely enraged, and he desperately attacked the Ninja King. The King of Ninjas used this method to keep procrastinating. Bellamy also discovered the fighting method of the Ninja King, and he realized that the Ninja King was adopting delaying tactics. But Bellamy didn't dare to easily remove the armed domineering that covered his whole body. Eagle Wave. Suddenly Zoro swung his 2 swords and suddenly beheaded Bellamy from a distance. 2 blue eagle-like sword chi hit Bellamy's body. But Bellamy's whole body was covered by black metallic luster armed domineering aura right now, and the 2 sword auras couldn't effectively harm him. Bellamy also wanted to attack Sauron, but considering that Sauron was also very agile, he had no choice but to give up. Bellamy, unable to advance or retreat, suddenly saw Usopp and others farther away. Bellamy suddenly became violent and rushed towards Usopp and others in the distance. Usopp was observing the battle at this time. When he saw Bellamy rushing towards him, his expression suddenly changed. What is he going to do? Usopp said in disbelief. The Ninja King and Zoro also saw Bellamy rushing towards Usopp. Oops, the Ninja King said anxiously. He will be killed, Zoro said through gritted teeth. Usopp saw Bellamy rushing towards him at an astonishing speed, and he quickly ran in the opposite direction, but Bellamy's speed now passed through the spring resonance, which was amazingly fast. Where can Usopp hide? Oh, it turns out it was you who shot the hidden arrow, you bastard with a long nose. As Bellamy got closer, he spotted the marksman longbow in Usopp's hand. He understood who was secretly shooting at him with a bow and arrow just now. Help, help. Usopp ran desperately, he was so scared that his nose and tears flew all over the place. Bellamy was getting closer and closer to Usopp. He waved his fist covered with armed haki, and was about to use it in the next approach. One blow would be enough to kill Usopp. What? Usopp suddenly fell down while running. Bellamy took the opportunity to get close to Usopp thoroughly. He swung his fist and jumped into the air just to hit Usopp. Usopp turned his head, tears and snot all over his face. Boom! Suddenly a figure leaped forward and a flying kick hit Bellamy's fist. Usopp looked into the air in shock. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. I saw that Bellamy's fist was stopped in mid-air by Sanji, who rushed out. After the blow, Sanji and Bellamy fell to the ground together. Bellamy looked at Sanji, and saw a young man with blonde hair and curly eyebrows, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. Another one, Bellamy said with a slight frown. Sanji looked at Bellamy. At this time Bellamy's whole body was covered by black metallic luster armed color domineering. But it was still possible to basically see Bellamy's appearance. "Are you that sideburn Bellamy?" Sanji asked calmly. Bellamy looked at Sanji, full of disgust, and said, "Why are there so many troublemakers today?" Sanji looked at Bellamy and said, "For a villain like you, the night will give you what is called glory." Usopp was moved when he saw Sanji make a timely move at a critical moment. But he was more aware of the danger at the scene, and Usopp quickly crawled off the ground. Sanji and the Spring Goddess arrived here in time to see the situation. Sanji quickly ran over to take action. Although Bellamy's body was covered in armed domineering just now, Sanji's blow was enough to change the direction of the opponent's fist, which led to Usopp's rescue. Zoro saw Sanji in the distance, and a smile appeared on his originally nervous face. "It's finally here, this cook," Sauron said. Before Rog and Luffy fell to the ground after being injured, Sanji participated in the battle in time, making his own combat effectiveness much stronger. "Looks like she's here too," said the Ninja King. The Ninja King saw the Spring Goddess in the distance. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 605. ID Con 17166662. At this time, the Goddess of Springs held 3 axes of ancient magic weapons. Coupled with a long golden hair, which flutters with the sea breeze blowing here, it is really like a goddess. Sanji and the Spring Goddess join the battle, so Bellamy can be said to be at a disadvantage now. Bellamy looked at Sanji, he was full of anger. "There are so many people who are willing to die, then I will make your death extremely miserable," Bellamy growled wildly. Bellamy was the first to attack Sanji. Sanji blocked it with both feet. Spring Cannon Fist. Bellamy punched Sanji hard. Sanji first felt that Bellamy's attack was coming towards the head. He quickly turned his upper body back and dodged the attack. Sanji moved swiftly to Bellamy's side. First meat. Belly. Thigh meat. Brisket. Tenderloin. Level minced meat. Level minced meat. First class minced meat. Superlative ground meat. Kick against etiquette. Sanji attacked Bellamy intensively with both feet. Bellamy's armed domineering body successfully resisted Sanji's powerful kicks. Bellamy's arms turned into giant springs, but she didn't attack. On the contrary, it was compressed to the extreme. His arms are facing each other, his fists are facing each other. Spring air explosion. Bellamy's arms snapped open and his fists slammed into each other. Boom. With an earth-shattering bang, Bellamy's fists hit together like 2 cannonballs. The surrounding air exploded violently. Sanji was thrown away by the huge impact. His whole body was thrown more than 40 meters. However, the power of Bellamy's spring air blast this time was not as powerful as when he used it before. First of all, Bellamy focused his body's maximum strength on that attack. And at that time Bellamy's left shoulder was not injured. Bellamy's current strength is not the greatest, and his left shoulder is also injured, which makes his attack not the most powerful. However, Sanji was still thrown more than 40 meters away and fell to the ground. At this time, Bellamy quickly resonated the ankles of both feet violently. Spring resonance. Bellamy moved quickly towards Sanji. Bellamy rushed to the front of Sanji, he pressed his right arm that became a giant spring to the extreme, and aimed his fist at Sanji's head to punch out. At this critical moment, everyone else is extremely anxious. Suddenly a voice sounded. Puck. At the same time a football-sized puck hit Bellamy. The puck hit Bellamy and exploded. Covering Bellamy's entire body, he froze into an ice sculpture. Usopp looked towards the direction of the attack. It is the goddess of spring water. The goddess of springs raised the silver axe high, and with the ancient magic spell in her mouth, the silver axe was surrounded by ice and snow. Sanji, who was rescued by the goddess of springs, quickly took advantage of this opportunity to stand up and distance himself from Bellamy's ice sculpture. After Bellamy was frozen into an ice sculpture, he still maintained the posture of attacking. Bellamy, who was inside the ice sculpture, was temporarily restricted from moving. However, Bellamy's whole body was covered in black metallic luster at this time, and his armor was domineering. His defense power was astonishing, and he didn't take any damage at all. Click, click. The ice that had frozen Bellamy quickly began to crumble. Sure enough, even the ice can't bind Bellamy. Sanji looked at Bellamy, who was about to break away, and said, "Boom." In the end, Bellamy broke away from the ice suddenly, and the original ice shattered into a group of broken ice blocks. Bellamy broke through the ice and stood on the ground of the pier again. He looked around and looked in the direction of the goddess of spring water. What's going on? Bellamy looked at the spring goddess with long golden hair in puzzlement. He saw the spring goddess lifting a silver axe, and ice and snow swirled around the silver axe. Bellamy was shocked by this weird scene. What's going on? Could it be that he is a user with some kind of devil fruit ability? Bellamy looked at the goddess of springs full of doubts and said. The goddess of springs put away the silver axe, raised the iron axe again, and at the same time whispered the ancient magic spell in her mouth. A wind appeared around the iron axe, and it became more and more violent. Hell of the wind! The Lady of the Fountain unleashes her magical attack on Bellamy. The wind around the iron axe formed hundreds of wind blades, flying towards Bellamy one after another. Bellamy was saturated head-on by the dense wind blades. How could this happen? Bellamy was shocked. The wind blades hit Bellamy's body intensively. Of course, Bellamy's armed domineering force successfully resisted the damage. But even so, Bellamy could still feel the power of the opponent's attack. After all, armed domineering is also subject to consumption when attacked. Hundreds of wind blades finished attacking Bellamy. The spring goddess looked at Bellamy, she also put away the iron axe, and then raised the golden axe. The spring water goddess whispered an ancient magic spell. First sparks appeared around the golden axe, then flames, and then the flames formed a bird-like form. Whether it was Bellamy or the many crew members of the Ape Mountain United Army who were watching the battle from a distance, they were extremely shocked. The flame actually formed a flying fire phoenix. How can it be? Bellamy looked at the formed fire phoenix in shock. The spring goddess said, "Go to fire phoenix." The fire phoenix formed by the flames rushed towards Bellamy with a screeching sound like a burning flame. The fire phoenix hit Bellamy and sent out a dazzling explosion. Bellamy, who was hit, was included in the flames of the explosion as if his body was being burned. Everyone watching the battle from a distance looked at all this in disbelief. It's really as powerful as a god. Too strong. Is this magic? Everything in nature can be manipulated, it's amazing. The flame can also turn into a phoenix, it's so shocking. Many crew members of the Saruyama United Army were shocked and admired. Mont Blanc Kulik and the others felt the power of magic even more. The ape looked at Bellamy, who was constantly being burned by the fire. It's really terrifying power, the orangutan said with emotion. The orangutan looked at the spring goddess and the golden axe held high in her hand. Magic is really shocking. It can manipulate ice and snow, strong winds, and flames. The orangutan looked at the goddess of springs in awe. Mont Blanc Kulik looked at the goddess of spring water, as if he remembered something. Mont Blanc Kulik said calmly, "There is magic in this world, so it seems that many legends are absolutely correct." Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Le'er a Dream. Chapter 606. ID Con 17167113. Whether it is a devil fruit or magic, they are all incredible things. It also shows that the world is big and many amazing things can happen. Usopp looked at Bellamy, who was wrapped in blazing flames, and he said excitedly, "She is indeed the goddess of spring water. So powerful. Powerful magic." Sanji looked at the spring goddess even more infatuatedly, his face full of love and admiration. "Goddess is amazing. Goddess, you will always be my favorite," Sanji said excitedly. Bellamy was wrapped in flames after being attacked by the fire phoenix. The armed arrogance on his body is still protecting his body. Bellamy, who was in the flames, looked at the goddess of the fountain who cast her magic. How is it possible? Could it be that this is legendary magic? How could there be such a ridiculous thing these days? Bellamy couldn't believe it. But to say that the opponent was able to perform this attack because of the devil fruit is hard to justify. After all, devil fruit abilities, even those with natural devil fruit abilities, only have one ability. But just now, the goddess of spring water can use 3 abilities of ice, wind, and fire to attack. There is absolutely no way this is a devil fruit ability. Then there is only magic in the legend. On the Great Root, there used to be a magical island where powerful magic was developed in ancient times, and it spread to all parts of the world. Bellamy had also heard of this legend, but Bellamy, who always despised and spurned any dream, just regarded it as a joke. In this situation, apart from the fact that the opponent has magic, what else can be explained? There are always incomprehensible things in this world. But I don't have time to spend with these guys now. Bellamy thought back to the real problem he faced, which was to defeat the Ape Mountain Combine. But according to the current situation, he couldn't wipe out the Aruyama United Army at all, mainly because of the appearance of helpers like Zoro and As soon as the goddess of spring appeared, he felt that he couldn't win at all. This is mainly because although Bellamy itself is strong, it is difficult to stand up to the will battle. His own armed domineering will always be difficult to sustain. Armed domineering color covers the whole body, consuming 10 times the normal stamina. Bellamy, fully armed and full of domineering energy, had been fighting for so long, and he was almost reaching his limit. But he didn't dare to disarm his domineering energy easily. If he did that, he would soon be killed in the intensive attacks of his opponents. The fire phoenix attacked by the goddess of spring water did not last indefinitely. After burning Bellamy for a while, the flame also dissipated. Swarms of sparks danced in the mid-air of the pier. All the people present looked at Bellamy, only to see that Bellamy's whole body was still covered by the black glossy armed domineering color, and she didn't suffer too much damage. This guy is really difficult to deal with. Usopp's face became serious again. Zoro looked at Bellamy and said, "What a difficult guy." Sanji looked at Bellamy and said, "It's really tough." The Ninja King looked at Bellamy, he held the ninja sword on his back with his hand, ready to fight again at any moment. The spring goddess looked at Bellamy calmly. Once Bellamy continued to attack, she would continue to use powerful magic attacks. Bellamy looked around. There are still many powerful enemies. It is absolutely impossible for him to annihilate the Ape Mountain United Army in one go. But he turned his eyes to the giant offshore dock. It may be difficult to kill these people, but it can still be done to destroy this huge obstacle. Bellamy's decided to shift its focus to a giant offshore dock. Bellamy's legs became 2 giant springs. He squeezed his legs tight. Bellamy's body turned to the direction of the giant sea dock. Spring rocket. Bellamy's legs, which were pinched to the extreme, bounced off. His body really shot up from the ground like a rocket. Bellamy's body flew up like a rocket, smashing a large piece of the pier's masonry and wood under her feet. Seeing Bellamy's body soaring into the air, the surrounding crowd all exclaimed. "What is he going to do?" Usopp said in surprise. "Run away," Sanji said, looking at Bellamy, who was flying into the air. "I'm afraid it's not that simple," Zoro said with a suspicious expression. Bellamy has soared into the sky, and finally flew to the giant sea dock. In the end, Bellamy slammed heavily on the top deck of the giant offshore dock like a meteorite. Boom! With a loud noise, Bellamy fell heavily on the top deck. Although the top deck made of steel was very strong, far from being comparable to the bricks and stones in the port area, it was still a sunken hole smashed out by Bellamy. It's like a crater hit by a heavy artillery shell. After Bellamy fell on the top deck of the giant offshore dock, he stood up straight and looked at everything around him. This top deck can be said to be very wide, comparable to a huge square. "It's been a long time since we've been away." Bellamy looked at the top deck and said with emotion. Many years ago, when this giant offshore dock was still owned by the previous owner, Bellamy once went there to kill and torture. At that time, Bellamy was not able to cause decent damage to the giant offshore dock, and could only kill the people on it as much as possible. However, after the captain and key crew members were tortured by his fatal injuries, they actually left this giant offshore dock to Mont Blanc Kulik and the Saracen allied forces. Now Bellamy was walking on the top deck. He looked at the 4 super forts on the top deck. These super turrets are actually the real source of the combat power of the giant sea dock. Okay, it's enough to destroy these 4 forts. Bellamy prepares for her most important combat operation. The 4 super turrets are located at the right front, right rear, and left rear of the giant sea dock. Bellamy decided to destroy the super turret on the right front first. He looked at the super fort on the right front and turned his legs into giant springs again. Then used the jumping ability generated by the spring to continuously approach the super turret on the right front. After a few spring jumps, Bellamy was under the super turret on the front right. From here Bellamy looked at the super fort up close. The giant sea dock had previously engaged in fierce battles with the security forces. First, it had a fierce naval battle with the main fleet of the security forces, and then it attacked the port of Magic Valley City and the nearby coastline. These continuous fierce battles have left the giant sea dock covered with scars. Although the giant offshore dock was not damaged as a whole, both the hull and the super turret were full of potholes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 607. Bellamy took a closer look at the super fort made of high-quality steel. It was also full of craters and obvious cracks. However, at the front end of the super fort, the 3 powerful super artillery pieces still looked into the distance. You can feel the power of this weapon from its aura, even Bellamy can feel it. It looks like a very solid weapon. How do I get in? Bellamy looked at the super turret. Although the super fort itself is full of scars, it is not yet accessible from the outside. Bellamy looked at a huge crater on the top deck. This crater not only dented the surrounding steel deck, but also had a penetrating hole in the middle, enough for humans to pass through. Bellamy quickly rushed to the hole and jumped out of there. Bellamy jumped into the cabin of the giant offshore dock below the top deck. From here, you may be able to enter the fort. Bellamy began to explore the passage in the cabin. Most of the crew members in this giant offshore dock went to the port area to party and stayed there. Now there are only a few remaining crew members staying in the giant offshore dock. Bellamy continued to move forward in this passage, and finally reached the corridor where he could enter the super turret on the right front. Bellamy continued inside and finally opened a door. As soon as you enter the door, there is a large room. There is a huge pivot in the middle of the room. This huge rotating shaft goes all the way up. This is the power room at the bottom of the super turret. The crew manipulated this huge rotating shaft to rotate the super fort as a whole in order to change its direction. Bellamy looked here, he looked at the rotating shaft, and suddenly thought about something. What a strange thing. I seem to have seen similar machinery. Could it be that this huge turret rotates with this thing? Bellamy also saw that this huge rotating shaft can control the direction of the super turret. After judging the function of the huge rotating shaft in front of him, Bellamy decided to destroy it. Bellamy turned his right arm into a giant spring, and then compressed it to the extreme. Spring cannon punch. Bellamy's right arm bounced away, and his right fist hit the huge rotating shaft like a cannonball. There was a loud, piercing sound, and the huge rotating shaft was hit hard by Bellamy. But this huge rotating shaft is also strong. Although it was hit at close range by Bellamy's domineering spring cannon fist, there were only a few cracks and a few pieces of iron slag where it was hit, but the whole thing was still intact. After Bellamy completed the attack, he looked at the huge rotating shaft. It's really strong. Then I'll destroy the auxiliary machinery. Bellamy couldn't directly destroy this huge rotating shaft, but he could also destroy the auxiliary machinery. Because it is not easy to move this huge rotating shaft made of steel, some auxiliary lever machinery is needed to promote its rotation. When Bellamy arrived at the auxiliary machine, his arms turned into giant springs. Both of his arms were pressed to the extreme. Double spring cannon punch. Bellamy punched out his two fists quickly. The dang auxiliary machinery was quickly destroyed after being hit. Bellamy has finally completed the destruction of the power room. He saw another staircase and started walking towards it. At this moment, a gunshot suddenly resounded throughout the power room. Bellamy was hit in the head by a bullet. He looked towards the stairs and saw a man dressed as a sailor holding a rifle and aiming it at his head. However, the enemy saw that the bullet hit Bellamy, who was wearing a domineering black metallic luster, but had no effect, and his whole body was trembling. Asshole. Bellamy rushed towards the man angrily. He punched the man, who was so frightened that he closed his eyes. But at the last moment, Bellamy's fist stopped in front of his head, turned into a palm, and grabbed the crew member's neck. Bellamy grabbed the crew member by the neck and brought him to him. "How dare you shoot me? But I'll spare your life. You tell me what I need to know," Bellamy threatened the crew member. I'm willing to confess," said the frightened crew member. Bellamy looked at the stairs again and said to the crew member, "Where is this level?" "This is the power room of the super turret, which is responsible for controlling the steering of the super turret," the frightened crew member said quickly. Bellamy's face looked better. He looked at the huge rotating shaft and said, "How can this rotating shaft be completely destroyed?" The crew member looked at the huge rotating shaft and said hesitantly, "This rotating shaft is very hard and cannot be destroyed at all." Bellamy glared at him again and said, "Okay, let's go to the upper level to take a look." Bellamy grabbed the crew member and went to the ammunition room in the middle. Here Bellamy saw that there were a lot of super weapons stored here. Heavy artillery shells. These super heavy artillery shells have a diameter of 2 meters. This was the first time Bellamy had seen such a huge cannonball. "These are really amazingly destructive things," Bellamy sighed after seeing these super heavy artillery shells. Usually heavy artillery shells with a diameter of 1 meter are frighteningly powerful, but super heavy artillery shells with a diameter of 2 meters are extremely rare. Bellamy was sighing in his heart now. If he didn't destroy the super forts of this giant offshore dock first, his pirate fleet would be destined to die. The 3 super cannons fired 3 2-meter diameter super heavy shells at once, which was enough to cause heavy damage to any heavy warship. Some may be destroyed directly on the spot. After Bellamy looked at these super heavy artillery shells, his eyes saw a lifting tower in the center of the ammunition room. There is a pulley lifting tower from there, which can send the super heavy artillery shells to the upper level. Layer. Bellamy looked at the crew member he had captured and asked in a fierce tone, "This is the room where the turret stores ammunition, right? Tell me everything you know honestly." "Yes, this is the ammunition room. The super heavy artillery shells stored here are further transported to the uppermost fire room by crane," the caught crew member said quickly. Bellamy looked at these super heavy shells again and said, "If these shells are detonated, then this fort will be destroyed." Upon hearing this, the captured crew member turned pale. He quickly said, "Don't be like this. We will all be killed." Bellamy looked at the enemy crew member who was greedy for life and death with disdain and said, "Of course I know, after all, I am here too. So you can't do it like that." Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 608. Bellamy now regrets not bringing some small time bombs or something like that, otherwise the place could be detonated. But who could have predicted so much? There is nothing we can do now. If it were to explode now, he would also be blown to pieces. Even if Bellamy's whole body was covered with powerful armed haki, he couldn't guarantee that he would survive. Bellamy took the crew member he captured and continued toward the stairs leading to the top floor. Through the stairs, Bellamy reached the fire room on the top floor. In the firepower room, Bellamy saw the barrels behind the 3 super cannons. These super artillery are loaded with super heavy artillery shells in the breech. Those super heavy artillery shells are fully 2 meters in diameter. The size of these super artillery is really shocking. Bellamy peered into the breech chambers of the 3 super cannons. He also saw a lot of equipment used to observe distances, such as mechanical instruments used by artillery. Bellamy looked at the crew member who was caught by him, and asked, "It's really powerful." "This is the fire room you just mentioned," the crew member quickly said. "This is the fire room. This place is usually responsible for observing the target and deciding to attack. Then issue orders to the 2 floors below. The power room on the bottom is responsible for adjusting the direction of the fort, and the ammunition room in the middle is responsible for delivering ammunition here." Bellamy looked at the 3 super cannons. "Breech," he said with emotion and regret, "what a powerful weapon. It's a pity it's not mine." Then Bellamy's tone became full of cruelty, "It's not mine, and no one else can want it." See, after observing these 3 super cannons inside the super fort, Bellamy was not only glad that he did not send his pirate fleet to fight directly, but also felt a little jealousy. Why isn't such a powerful weapon his? But the most important problem he faces now is to destroy these super forts. Bellamy looked here, thinking about how to destroy the super fort as quickly as possible. Once a method is found, the other 3 super forts can also be destroyed according to law. Bellamy looked at the breech of the 3 super cannons in the fire room on this floor. What if I destroy these artillery pieces? Bellamy suddenly had an idea. Since it is troublesome to destroy the entire fort, then just destroy these 3 super artillery pieces. The combat effectiveness of the super fort is actually these super artillery pieces. 3 huge triple super artillery pieces with a diameter of 2 meters are the real source of the super fort's combat power. Once the triple super artillery is successfully destroyed, the super fort will become scrap metal. Bellamy looked at the 3 super cannons and decided to destroy them quickly. Bellamy threw the captured crew member away, and the crew member was so frightened that he quickly fled. Bellamy ignored him and observed the super artillery. The barrels of super cannons are very hard, made of hardened steel alloy, which is much harder than the fine steel of the super turret itself. Bellamy first turned his right arm into a giant spring, and then compressed it to the extreme. He aimed his right fist at the barrel of the super cannon and punched it out. The barrel of the dang super cannon was hit so hard that sparks flew out. But there are almost no scars on the barrel of the super artillery. Bellamy's own spring cannon punch cannot destroy the barrel of the super cannon. In this case, Bellamy decided to use another method. He looked at the lifting tower in the middle of the fire room that connected to the ammunition room below. Bellamy then used this crane tower to travel back and forth between the fire room and the ammunition room. He brought up 9 super heavy artillery shells in a row. 3 super heavy artillery shells were loaded into the breech of each barrel. Each of the 3 super cannons has 3 super heavy artillery shells stuffed in them. Bellamy closed the breech cover of the super cannon and then adjusted the 3 super cannons. Of course, these 3 super cannons are adjusted to a state where they can attack. Bellamy's whole body was covered with a black metallic luster of armed domination. He looked at the 3 super cannons beside the lever of the triple super cannon. At this time, Bellamy still had a bit of worry on his face. This is how he wants to make the 3 super artillery fire. In this case, each of the 3 super cannons has 3 super heavy artillery shells stuffed inside. Once fired under such circumstances, the super artillery will explode. In this way, the super artillery can be scrapped. However, it is also a bit dangerous for Bellamy. After all, how much destructive power will be leaked when the internal chamber of these super artillery is exploded is a test for Bellamy. Okay, let's take a gamble. Bellamy made up his mind and pulled the lever of the triple super cannon. Boom, 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 3 huge muffled sounds resounded in the sky around the super fort. At this time, everyone in the port area heard this terrible sound. "What's going on?" said the ape. "It seems to be a super turret, and the sound is coming from the super turret on the right front," the orangutan said. "Could it be that Bellamy is up to something?" Mont Blanc Kulik said worriedly. Bellamy just left the port area and headed to the giant offshore dock. Everyone is very worried that Bellamy may be carrying out some conspiracy activities at the giant offshore dock. Inside the super fort on the right front of the giant offshore dock, Bellamy stood on the floor of the fire room. There just was an amazing tremor here. Bellamy looked at the 3 super cannons with an excited smile on his face. "That's great. You guys are just right for being strong," Bellamy said with a smile on his face. "I saw that the barrels of the 3 super cannons were distorted and deformed by the explosion, and there were even some cracks. But it was just right that the explosive power was not leaked. Otherwise Bellamy would suffer too. Although his whole body is now covered with powerful armed domineering energy, it is difficult to say whether he can avoid being injured in the face of the destructive power leaked." The barrels of the 3 super cannons were twisted and cracked. Obviously it can no longer be used. Bore explosion is fatal to these super artillery. If someone can repair these 3 super cannons, then they need to disassemble all 3 super cannons, conduct complex smelting in a steel-making plant with very advanced equipment, and then reshape the barrels. The only person who can do these things is probably the builder of this giant offshore dock.